Through the Bible series in the Old Testament, 2 Kings. If you want to turn to that, 2 Kings chapter 6. The theme of these chapters, the central figure, rather, of these chapters is Elisha the prophet. Elisha has, I don't know if you'd call the privilege or honor, of preaching in Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom, which is totally gone against the Lord. And he's still doing a great work there. I mean, even the king, all the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel were wicked, and some worse than the others. Now, in this section of Scripture, you're going to see that some of the kings were better at paying attention to what the prophet said. But despite all of this idol worship going on, and all of this wickedness and evil practices which they learned from idol worship, because it dealt with sexual immorality as well. With all of this going on, Elisha has several schools of the prophets. We're going to read about what happened in one of those schools here in the first few verses of chapter 6. There was a school at Gilead. There was a school at Ramah, one at Bethel, and one at Jericho. It's quite interesting that there was a school of the prophets at Bethel, because Bethel was one of the places that the first king of Israel, Jeroboam, set the stage for all the rest of the history of the country when he set up 2 calf idols and told the people to worship them. One was set up at Bethel, and the second one was set up at Dan. So here, right in the heart of the devil's, headquarters, you'd say, is a school of the prophets. Now, there was a difference in personalities of Elisha and Elijah. Elisha was mentored by Elijah. Elisha was. And so he learned a lot from him. Elijah was very aggressive. He was, John the Baptist was compared to him. We know what John the Baptist was like from the New Testament. Elisha was a little more quiet. He was not as outgoing as the other prophet, great prophet Elijah, but the Lord used him to do a lot of miracles. And in this particular miracle that we're going to see in verses 1 through 7 here in chapter 6, it's a very small miracle. It's not like the others Elisha already performed, like raising the dead and doing some really demonstrative big things. This is a small miracle, and I think it addresses itself to the idea that God is concerned about everyday things of our lives. We call on Him when we're out of work, can't get a job, when there's too many bills at the end of the month and not enough money. We call on Him when our loved ones are sick, when our loved ones are dying. We call on Him when we're having difficulty with temptations or getting along with people in our everyday lives. And we think that God is only concerned sometimes of the big things. And He wants to hear about it all as far as our daily lives are concerned. And this is one example that this incident that took place at the School of the Prophets was in our minds, a very small incident. And we would say, well, guy, don't worry, don't fret it. Don't sweat it. Just go down to the rural king and buy you another axe. What's the big deal? The problem is there wasn't any place to buy any more axes. Let's read about it. Starting with verse 1 of chapter 6. The company of the prophets said to Elisha, "Look, the place where we meet with you is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan, where each of us can get a pole, and let us build a place there for us to meet." Now, the School of the Prophets was like a Bible college. And I think it's kind of interesting here that these students are the ones who recognize that they didn't have enough room for their teaching, so they themselves are going to build a bigger place for the School of the Prophets. Now, that doesn't work in our modern colleges, Bible colleges or otherwise. The trustees of the college will call in architects. They will get bids from large building contractors, and the students have nothing to do with actually building the campus that they work on. But these fellas were hard workers, and they were concerned about the spiritual things of God and getting the message of God out, but they also were concerned about being taught by people like Elisha. And every time he'd come into town, he would go and talk to them about what they can do to be better preachers of the Word. And another thing about these School of Prophets, they would go to these classes. Now, they didn't stay on campus like I did when I went to Kentucky Christian University. They stayed in their homes, and then they went to the locale right near their home where they had the teaching. And so they said, let us build a place for us to meet. And here we see Elisha saying, go. Gave him permission. Then one of them said, won't you please come with your servants? I will, Elisha replied. And he went with them. So you see that Elisha wasn't just concerned about the big events. He was always concerned about the everyday events in the lives of these students. They went to the Jordan and began to cut down trees. Now here's where this miracle takes place. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. Oh no, my Lord. When he's saying this, he isn't calling out to God in vain. He's talking to Elisha. He cried out, it was borrowed. So this man borrowed this piece of equipment, this tool, and it, for all purposes in his mind, was lost. It went down in the muddy Jordan. Now, we remember just from last week that one of the reasons that Naaman resisted going to the Jordan to be baptized was because it was so dirty. So this axe head fell in the Jordan, and the man of God, that's Elisha in verse 6, the man of God asked, where did it fall? When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it there and made the iron float. Lift it out, he said. Then the man reached out his hand and took it. So this is a very interesting miracle. And I'm sure that that individual who borrowed the tool was really happy that he had not only the tool back to work with, but that he also could return the tool to the one to whom it belonged. Now we're going to see one of the big miracles again of Elisha, starting in verse number 8. It had to do with the enemies of Israel, the Arameans. And they're always causing problems for the Israelites. Let's now read verse 8. Now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such and such a place. Now this particular miracle is very interesting Because Elisha is given the ability by God to know the actions, all the actions of the king. All the thoughts of the king are passed on to him. Now, he can't read men's minds, but God does. And God told him what the king was going to do next. So, him as a king of the enemy king, he started blaming his own men. He said, who's getting all this information out to our enemies? So, we read about it starting in verse number 9. Remember, he said, I'll set up my camp in such and such a place. The man of God, that was Elisha, sent word to the king of Israel. Now, this particular king accepted the teachings of Elisha. So many of the northern kings would simply persecute them, have them killed even, or torture them. But he did listen to Elisha, which was very good, because it saved him out a lot of circumstances when it came to the wars he was having. So the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there. It's a particular place that they were going to come and attack the children of Israel. So in verse 10, the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and time again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. Now, verse 11, this enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, tell me, which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? None of us, my lord the king, said one of the officers, but Elisha the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. So you could see how much God filled the head of Elisha so that he can keep abreast of what the enemy was doing. So now we see that the king of Aram is going to go get Elisha, just like the king of Israel, the wicked Ahab at the time, was always trying to get Elijah and kill him. So now we have this king of Aram who is he's not in any way Jewish, he is simply a heathen. He said, go find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. The report came back, he is in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots and strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning. Now here again you're looking at Elisha and his servant getting up to start the day, and this is what the servant sees. An army, and this is the army of Aram, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh no, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. So get ready for another miracle here. Elisha prayed, it says in verse 17. Elisha prayed. Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes to give him encouragement, because the enemy had already surrounded them. And he looked and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. This was God's army getting ready to defeat the army of Aram. So, in verse 18, as the enemy came down toward him, they were really coming. Elisha prayed to the Lord. That's one great thing about Elisha. He's always praying to God, just like we've noticed. Strike this army with blindness. That was his prayer to God. Strike the enemy army with blindness. So he struck them with blindness as Elisha had asked. Isn't it interesting that when we have a right relationship with God, God does our bidding as long as it's within His will? Elisha told them, this is not the road and this is not the city. Now you have a whole army that's blind. And he says, follow me and I'll lead you to the man you're looking for. And he led them to Samaria, which is the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. That's the enemy they're going to try to defeat. And here they are blind going into the enemy territory. Then we see in verse 20, after they entered the city, Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men so that they could see. He asked the Lord to blind them, and I was asking the Lord to open their eyes. Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and there they were inside Samaria, right inside of enemy territory. So now the king of Israel is wondering, what am I going to do with this army now that God turned them over to me? And so he asked this question in verse 21. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, shall I kill them, my father? Shall I kill them? Of course, that would be the instant reaction of any king or general when the enemy comes to town. Shouldn't we wipe them out? But God had other plans. In verse 22, do not kill them, he answered. Would you kill those you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them, so that they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. You see, when you can do something besides using weapons or warfare to get back at an enemy, that's the best technique. And that's what was happening here, because I want you to notice as this section closes what the king of Aram did. So, here we have the king now of Israel. So he prepared a great feast for them, and after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away. And they returned to their master, who was the king of Aram. And notice the results. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. So here we see Elisha as a peacemaker and keeping the enemy away for a little while. Now, as we read on, the enemy comes back, and the enemy surrounds the city. The enemy closes off the city. We'll learn this next week for one of the most horrible things that could have taken place. And we'll read about that next time that we meet. Our time is up. It's 5 till 8. Does anybody want to make a comment on what scripture we already read?